Do you plan on staying in Michigan after graduation?
Not right after graduation, no.
Honestly, probably not.
Sadly, that does not fit into my future plans.
No. I don't know.
Probably not.
Try to answer the question, so what's going on? And it's really only in that window that people have begun to realize, well, wait a minute. One of the things that's going on is that for a combination of reasons, this place, this state, Michigan, and the older industrial cities and factory towns, whether it's Flint or Saginaw or Muskegon or Grand Rapids and Detroit, aren't necessarily the kinds of places that folks your age, young people, young educated people in particular, are flocking to find and make their lives. So it's meant that more people, from business leaders to political leaders and others who have some stake or some opportunity to maybe worry about the economy, are all now trying to understand what is it with the young people, how are they making choices. And so there's interest, strong interest, as there is in a lot of places like Michigan, in how do we make Michigan be a place that keeps, attracts, is a sort of magnet for young people and all the talent and energy, and then kind of creation of activity that they represent.
If you're under 25 and living in Michigan, it's a great place to live. There's plenty to do, and you're in college and you're doing all these things. And if you're over 40 and you're married with kids, it's a great place to live. If you're 25 to 40 and you're not married and you don't have kids, it's a hard place to live. A couple of the things that we're seeing as it does relate to, let's say, land use and other things, one thing that we've noticed about Michigan is 76% of the households in Michigan live without children. So you have the bulk of the households in the state of Michigan don't have any kids in them. And if you wonder why that number's high, it's, well, most people are waiting until they're in their 30s to get married. The rate of divorce is 50-ish, so when those people divorce, if they have kids, somebody's living without the children, generally. And then you have empty nesters, and then you have people living longer. So you really have this kind of smaller slice of people who actually live with kids. The problem is Michigan's housing stock. 70% of the housing stock in Michigan are single-family detached homes.
You know, the design and the layout of the community are also, just totally decisive in how, in how close-knit that community can be. I find that Okemos, my hometown, is a bit too spaced out. It's a sprawling place. There are a lot of neighborhoods where the houses are quite distant from each other, and I think that just leads to feelings of isolation among the people who live there.
There used to be a time, 50 years ago and earlier, when we lived in much more compact urban areas. We either lived in relatively dense cities or compact towns, or you lived in the countryside. And those cities and towns could provide mass transit very efficiently, cost effectively, and successfully, in part because of the concentration of people along those transit corridors. That has changed after World War II, when we began suburbanizing. So today we have a society that is primarily suburban, and those central cities have lost significant amounts of their population. Detroit, for instance, has lost more than half of its population since its peak in the early 50s. Most of those folks went to outlying suburban areas, making transit that much more difficult. So I think one of the things that that a more sustainable model of land use brings with it is more compact development and locating dense land uses along transit corridors to provide those kinds of opportunities.
I think, frankly, mass transportation is basically a must, be it a bus system, subway system.
Bike lanes. One of my goals is to go without owning a car. I'm going to decide to live in a place that helps me to do that.
I think an ideal community would be one that is close-knit and easy to get around in by ways other than cars.
Buses are for poor people is the narrative in Michigan. And what we're finding is that's not true with the 20-something crowd. This is where it's not a with or without kids. It's truly a generational difference. That we've tracked a number of people where what we've seen is that the 20-something crowd, for example, is completely comfortable taking the bus. And they don't have a problem. And the number one reason that we hear this, we actually did a film project where we took an independent filmmaker to Minneapolis, Madison, and also Wicker Park in Chicago. And we asked them about their preferences in transit. And the number one preferred choice was bicycle over mass transit, which I didn't want to hear because I wanted to hear mass transit for sure. And the reason was environmental reasons, health and fitness reasons, financial reasons, and social reasons. They wanted to kind of be out of the box, kind of, not stuck in this box. The number two was bus.
And so we're looking at adding bicycle lanes, we're looking at adding shared use paths, we're looking at constructing refuge islands across busy streets in places that don't have signalized intersections to encourage that type of activity.
I like using public transportation a lot. It's especially convenient for young people who go out to bars and don't want to drive home.
It's also nice that there are like a lot of free activities to do. Like one of the things that I really like about Ann Arbor is that Michigan Theater has all those free showings in the summer. There are like concerts in the parks. So it's really nice when the city or business within it provide things.
Dense commercial area where there's restaurants and things that people can do, like concerts or just get a cup of coffee.
And a friend of mine who's an attorney in Birmingham, Michigan, she kind of gave me a little anecdote about why. And she said that, she's not married, she doesn't have kids, she's 32, she's successful, she goes out after work for a drink, on Friday, and then probably goes out one other night during the week. So that's 2 nights a week she goes out. There are 50 weeks in a year. So she goes out 100 nights a year. She's been out of undergrad for 10 years. That's 1,000 nights. So it's easy for her to look at Chicago and see 1,000 nights. It's easy to look at New York and see 1,000 nights. It's not easy to look at Birmingham and see 1,000 nights. I don't want to go to the same restaurant, the same bar, the same cafe. I want to go to a lot of places. So when you go to a place like Chicago, there are a lot of places to go. You go to a place like New York, there's a lot of these, I guess what, Robert Putnam calls third places. Where are you when you're not at home and you're not at work? As you start getting a high density of third place amenities, then all of a sudden that housing makes more and more sense.
Good restaurants that have, all kinds of different ethnic foods.
I go to farmers markets all the time when I'm home in Chicago and even here in Ann Arbor. And I love the fresh and varied foods that are available.
Portage has a lot of nice parks and things like that. There's a lot of lakes, there's a lot of water frontage, but we don't have a really nice downtown area at all. It's really just the main drag and then a bunch of strip malls.
I think it would have to have a lot of green space. I love to run, so I want to be able to have a place to run.
I like green space.
Okay, so we were just talking about
basically, a place where everyone can come together and spend time, either maybe both in and outdoors, ideally.
I think, for me personally, I like density, but I don't think, density doesn't have to be skyscrapers.
I think one of the most important things for a community is the aesthetic value. It needs to seem clean, and it's kind of sad how a lot of the inner city has the kind of has a general feeling of grime and grayness, and it's really important for a community to seem green and clean.
The physical appearance, how it looks. I like interesting things like old buildings or, outdoor sculptures or art, as well as like landscaping things like trees, parks, even if they're not like big parks, but like, small green spaces, even like little rooftop gardens or things like that.
When you go to downtown Ann Arbor, every storefront is filled. You drop me at the corner, everything is filled. It's there for me to consume, right? It's very simple. When you go to Detroit, it's very fragmented. There's nothing there for me to consume, so I don't feel comfortable there. So the problem is Detroit having enough density of those third places. So the problem is people go there and they want to love the city because they might like the handful of buildings that have beautiful architecture. They like the grittiness of it, the authenticity of it. It's not the mall. But it feels awkward because they don't know what to do when they get there. You can only go to the DIA and go to MoCAD and say, I didn't even get to consume anything. It's a little unnatural feeling.
I think that older buildings are really important to give a place a sense of history and identity.
Lots of historic kind of buildings too, and preserving those kind of things, not just a new downtown that kind of comes from the ground up, something that's actually built up over time.
Not only green space, but also like walking and biking areas. I like cities with trees.